And we are up and running, and it is a gloomy day in the Midwest, but on the warm side. And of course, the weather is always a subject of change, and it's a very good way to view the entire planetary process here. If you don't like what's going on, give it 10 minutes and there will be something entirely different available to you. So, have you been getting some new and amusing things there, Stephen, out in sunny California?
Oh, yeah, I think that when it comes to the weather, we can even just look at our own perception and see how much that's changing. And as far as that goes, I think my own perception changes even more than the weather. So always interesting.
Yeah, it is, and it's a game that the ego loves to play. It keeps us engaged, and that was the intention. That was the design of the ego, is to keep us distracted from the possibility of having a life that is filled with grace and peace.
No, the ego says, no, not that.
Yeah, and the ego can be vicious in the way that it attacks you. The more you go into the course, the more the ego starts to become responsive, and you will find that there are times when you will have a lot of anger for no apparent reason. You will have conundrums that show up in your life that distract you, that force you to, stop and address things like, oh my God, your head's on fire, that sort of thing. But nonetheless, it is through perseverance, through making that commitment and following through with that commitment, that we are able to transcend the ego and get back into our true self.
Right. And it brings us to A Course in Miracles, which is what Jesus says is a course in mind training, and that an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. So we have to train our minds.
That's true. And even, it's interesting how that plays out in the material world, because we see people who have the appearance of having accomplished a great deal. But then when you follow them around, you begin to realize that even though they have trained their mind on specific things like manifesting, financial wealth, if you really start looking at the rest of their life, it's like, there are multiple disasters going on at all times. So when we are training our minds, we're not really focusing in on a specific thing. We are giving the overall vision of the mind structure and form and discipline. And that is the beauty of A Course in Miracles. It leads us in that direction, but in a very graceful and in a very benign way. It's not sitting in an ashram on the top of the Himalayas on cold stone floors, beating yourself up for 10 hours a day. It's a process where it's a gentle release from material mindset and the beginnings of a spiritual mindset. And so that's why the Course has had such a huge impact on so many people's lives.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I can absolutely attest to that. And training that ego mind within us so that we can bring it to a state of surrender, so that we can slowly bring ourselves from what we're going to talk about in this section, perception to knowledge.
And I suppose you probably should start that off. This is section 8 of chapter 13. And this has got some very powerful tools to work with if you're willing to, invest in it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with first paragraph starts off as, all healing is release from the past. That is why the Holy Spirit is the only healer. He teaches that the past does not exist, a fact which belongs to the sphere of knowledge, and which therefore no one in the world can know. It would indeed be impossible to be in the world with this knowledge. For the mind that knows this unequivocally knows also it dwells in eternity and utilizes no perception at all. It therefore does not consider where it is, because the concept where does not mean anything to it. It knows that it is everywhere, just as it has everything, and forever.
Now, that's a nice introduction because it's giving us a really clear um, set of parameters to work with. And it's telling us that even though we may temporarily have amnesia, nonetheless, on a much more deeper and profound level, a part of our mind is still in residence in the mind of God, where it was created. So we start off here with a subtle affirmation of, the fact that there's nothing to be fearful of and nothing has been lost. And it really gives us a little bit more impetus to advance further with these thoughts.
That's something I really love about A Course in Miracles, is that it's not in any way saying that you go back to heaven after you die, after your body dies and you discard it, or that it's going to be some time or location, but that you can actually remember that state of awareness now, currently, if you can train your mind to remember it.
Right. And we have all of the tools to work with when we're approaching the daily lessons, and that's why the lessons are such a powerful transformative process. So for all of you people who are listening to the dialogue, even if you've been playing around with the course for a while, if you haven't delved into the daily lessons, I would highly recommend that. And going a little bit further here, it says the very real difference between perception and knowledge becomes quite apparent if you consider this. There is nothing partial about knowledge. Every aspect is whole, and therefore no aspect is separate. You are an aspect of knowledge, being in the mind of God, who knows you. All knowledge must be yours, for in you is all knowledge. Perception, at its loftiest, is never complete. Even the perception of the Holy Spirit, as perfect as perception can be, is without meaning in heaven. Perception can reach everywhere under his grace, for the vision of Christ beholds everything in light. Yet no perception, however holy, will last forever. So we're kind of drawn back around into that idea that the illusion of time has a lot of unhinged aspects to it.
Right. And then it's coming right in to teach us to not be attached to the perception and to the forms, so that we can come into a place of just going straight to knowledge, going straight to that awareness of truth, and not getting hung up on the perception. Because as it says, no matter how lofty your perception is, it's still incomplete. So why shoot for something that's always going to be incomplete? But the Holy Spirit can still use that along the journey.
Yes, and actually it ties into other people's perception, if we believe that there actually are other people around us, because ultimately we do have to reconcile the law of one. But in this state of disconnect, it places us in a situation where we are able to actually word for it, to revolutionize our lives through these processes that are given to us.
Right. And so the next paragraph reads, perfect perception then has many elements in common with knowledge, making transfer to it possible. Yet the last step must be taken by God, because the last step in your redemption, which seems to be in the future, was accomplished by God in your creation. The separation has not interrupted it. Creation cannot be interrupted. The separation is merely a faulty formulation of reality with no effect at all. The miracle, without a function in heaven, is needful here. Aspects of reality can still be seen, and they will replace aspects of unreality. Aspects of reality can be seen in everything and everywhere, yet only God can gather them together by crowning them as one with the final gift of eternity.
And that whole concept of creation all of a sudden is coming under the microscope as we're moving into this paragraph. And a lot of times we are given the idea that creation is, creating worlds and creating unicorns and creating, clouds and sunsets and rainbows and that is really key to the ego's plan, is to give us this idea that creation involves objectification. So when we really start digging deeper into A Course in Miracles, we all of a sudden are given this idea that creation is extension. That's what it says throughout the Course. In other words, since you are the perfect divine being that you are, the highest form of creation is to, in essence, replicate yourself and project that outward. So that's how the whole process of this idea of heaven works. It is a place where God is not only manifest in all directions throughout eternity, but all of God's creation is, once again, creating within themselves. So it's just this astonishing and glorious process of this unfolding of love and the unfolding of God recreating itself throughout eternity.
Yeah, we were making this distinction this morning, actually, that the Course makes this distinction actually between creating and making, in which creating is actually that extension of love, the true creation, but making is what the ego does. It tries to make things in order to acquire them, to accumulate physical things, objectification, as you mentioned. And so when we make things, then they're always going to be illusory and temporal. So, even if you make yourself a sandwich, that's not actually creating. The creating would be the love you extend while eating the sandwich, maybe. So.
Yes, and that is very much contingent on the type of sandwich.
Right.
As we're getting closer and closer to the mid part of March here, we have the inevitability of corned beef sandwiches showing up around us, and so that's a little divertimento there that is absolutely meaningless.
Well, I really like salami, so.
Well, obviously you don't have that much Irish about you.
I have some, but I think the Italian takes over. So, ego identity is always fascinating.
It is, and you can get all puffed up about, I am this and I am that, and he, she, and whatever. I enjoy my Native American ancestry, and I enjoy, my European ancestry, but I certainly at this point in my own evolution don't identify with it in the sense of, I am the work of evolution through these different archetypes that has been presented to the world to play with. So we can appreciate the beauty and the art of various cultures, but when we start taking on the deeper aspects of it and trying to live it out, it can get very weird.
Very weird, yes. So are you want to read this next one?
Yeah, this next part here. Apart from the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit has no function. He is not separate from either, being in the mind of both, and knowing that the mind is one. He is a thought of God, and God has given him to you because he has no thoughts he does not share. His message speaks of timelessness in time, and that is why Christ's vision looks upon everything with love. Yet even Christ's vision is not his reality. The golden aspects of reality that spring to light under his loving gaze are partial glimpses of the heaven that lies beyond them. So here we're being given that idea that we'll eventually even evolve beyond the idea of the Christ. And that is that final step that we are offered as, proof to who our truth is. Where we are so completely reunited in God that there is no distinction between God and any kind of separate self. So we're getting these little glimpses of what the true depth and breadth of heaven actually is.
Yeah, right. And even things that we would categorize in our realm of perception as extremely pleasurable or extremely enjoyable, if that's still in the realm of perception, like if you need a drug to get there, or a type of food to get there, or some sort of bodily related activity to get there, anything based on that impulse, then you know that the experience of God is actually going to always be even greater than that. It's going to be more pleasurable, more ecstatic than that. It can't even compare, really. So.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years back, some sage or guru said that, if you think orgasm and great sex is fabulous, imagine when you enter into the realm of God, it's like an extended orgasm. And that sounds very attractive on the surface, but then when you think about it, again, it's putting a container on things, because ultimately, the orgasmic experience is terminal. So, that's when we crash and have la petite mort, as they say, the little death. And so when we're aspiring to any kind of physicality, then we have completely removed ourselves from comprehending the nature of God.
Yeah, luckily it's beyond description and all labeling.
That is very true.
And this next one I will take. This is the miracle of creation, that it is one forever. Every miracle you offer to the Son of God is but the true perception of one aspect of the whole. Though every aspect is the whole, you cannot know this until you see that every aspect is the same, perceived in the same light and therefore one. Everyone seen without the past thus brings you nearer to the end of time, by bringing healed and healing sight into the darkness, and enabling the world to see. For light must come into the darkened world to make Christ's vision possible even here. Help him to give his gift of light to all who think they wander in the darkness, and let him gather them into his quiet sight that makes them one.
That kind of gives you the idea of like a pond that is very placid. The lives that we have in this realm, you could probably imagine as dropping a pebble into a pond and seeing the ripples going and going and going. But when we are on our way back home, the ripples are finally coming to cessation. And ultimately, there will be an absolute stillness where the totality of the pond is actually revealed to us, the absolute lucid beauty of it. So again, this is another example of how very poetic A Course in Miracles actually is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And That's interesting you say that. I had someone describe that to me recently, that really, if you know, if we're always vibrating, always fluctuating in our perception and reality, then you know that God is not that. God is the stillness. God is unmoving, unchanging. And so when we come back to that awareness of God, then we have to stop. We have to come to, like you said, cessation of that vibrating state, fluctuating state.
Exactly. And that is when we start to finally approach that level of the ecstatic state, which is so inconceivable in this realm that it's almost pointless to try and have dialogue around it.
Yeah, and we have like what records of different saints, like Mother Teresa, who has gone into that state of being. Correct? Have you heard of things like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. And one of the people who was very influential in the awakening of America was Paramahansa Yogananda. He brought a very enlightened approach to Christianity. He was considered himself to be, bound to Jesus. He was very much an advocate of the teachings of Jesus, but he was putting a broader, more expanded vision into what Jesus was talking about. And he had the ecstatic experience of total immersion. And there's another fellow by the name of Douglas Holmes who wrote The Science of Mind. And in some of his private papers and that were published after his death, he describes the first time he hit that key experience, and he was actually preaching to the congregation there in Hollywood, and he had the ecstatic experience, and he actually saw the total union of every soul in the building that was with him as being a part of himself, and all of the collective there as being a part of God. So, and I had a similar experience back in 1973 when I had my first collision with that deeper level of reality, where I saw that nothing existed outside of pure light. And at the center of this vision I had, there was the purest of pure light, which was, the source of all life, the source of all love, and the source of all being.
Yeah, I can relate to the experiences that you've named off in a way, but it's kind of interesting actually when I use even the terminology, when I say, it feels kind of funny saying I had the experience, because really the experience was of the removal of the removal of the self that perceives, and that that's even describing the story. So so really it feels funny to talk about it, because the reality is just so far beyond comprehension in this in the rational mind.
Absolutely, yes, and it is definitely entirely apart from the mortal self. So that's again why we are trying to make that break away from this personality that we have crafted called the ego.
Right, because I think that the fear there is that without the mortal self, that there's just nothing, and that there's just death, and that when your body dies, it's just over, just darkness. But that's actually when you if you experience just even for a split second the removal of that mortal self, then you whatever is left is ecstasy. And so that's really all the proof you need.
Yes, it is. And it's very attainable. It's not like this is something that is so far beyond our reach that it takes 57 lifetimes into the future in order to be able to experience it.
Right. And so on to the next paragraph. You want to read that one, Chris? This is the mirror.
Okay. They are all the same, all beautiful and equal in their holiness. And he will offer them unto his Father as they were offered unto him. Am I in the right section here?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. There is one miracle as there is one reality. And every miracle you do contains them all, as every aspect of reality you see blends quietly into the reality of God. The only miracle that ever was is God's most holy Son, created in the one reality that is his Father. Christ's vision is his gift to you. His being is his Father's gift to him. So again, this is encapsulating, the completeness, the wholeness of God and God's creation.
I really appreciate how A Course in Miracles talks about, he'll go from one paragraph talking about, your brothers, and talking about the different people that you may see around you. But then he always comes back to that unification, that he starts off the paragraph, they are all the same. And to really experience that, to really notice that, it may seem to the ego mind that would be bad, because, diversity is this good idea. But actually, to the Holy Spirit's vision, we are all the same. We're all in the same mind of God, Son of God.
Exactly. Yeah, the whole rationale that the ego gives us about diversity and acceptance is just, it's a thin veil that ultimately will collapse, because even in the most extreme levels of diversity, you find very, very little tolerance of one group for another. So, it's important not to be seduced by rhetoric that's floating around out there when it really doesn't have any substance to it.
Yes. And this next paragraph says, be you content with healing, for Christ's gift you can bestow, and your Father's gift you cannot lose. Offer Christ's gift to everyone and everywhere, for miracles offered the Son of God through the Holy Spirit attune you to reality. The Holy Spirit knows your part in the redemption, and who are seeking you and where to find them. Knowledge is far beyond your individual concern. You who are part of it and all of it need only realize that it is of the Father, not of you. Your role in the redemption leads you to it by reestablishing its oneness in your mind. So there's that ego distinction, right? He's talking to you and saying, it's not for you. This is not for like your ego mind to get.
Right, and we're also given a strong validation around the idea that everybody that's supposed to be in your life either is in your life now or will appear in your life. And I think this is something that a lot of us struggle with. We have relationships that's sour. We have moments where we're in conflict with people and we want to close the door on that and push them away and never talk to them again. But here we're given that little nudge in that direction of realizing that there are no accidental meetings, there are no random occurrences. Everybody that shows up has a function, and you have the most important function, which is to be able to confront the illusion on every quarter. And when you see somebody who's appearing to be an enemy, you have to rise above that and step into a state of forgiveness and to separate the truth from the error by seeing them as the Christ and calling out to you for love or redemption.
Right. And then sometimes that may mean that, like you've talked about many times, taking a step back and learning to open up to a new perception from the Holy Spirit as to what is actually going on, how you actually need to be perceiving this person that would be more in alignment with truth.
Exactly. And even then, if if you're not able to get a handle on it to that degree, at least being at peace with the fact that this person is there in your life, you don't have to take any action for or against them, but just to wait until that inner voice gives you, the words to say or the action to take. So again, it's an ongoing process of surrender.
Right. And the next one, you want to read?
Yeah, this is when you have seen your brothers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When you have seen your brothers as yourself, you will be released to knowledge, having learned to free yourself through him who knows of freedom. Unite with me under the holy banner of his teaching. And as we grow in strength, the power of God's Son will move in us, and we will leave no one untouched and no one left behind. And suddenly time will be over, and we will all unite in the eternity of God the Father. The holy light you saw outside yourself in every miracle you offered to your brothers will be returned to you. And knowing that the light is in you, your creations will be there with you as you are in your Father. And again, we're getting into that vision of what creation truly is and how we have created everybody that's around us as we have been created by God. So it's kind of a fun like tornado, I guess you could say, of kicking out these sparks that are sparks of God, and they're just kind of whipping around in all directions, going all directions, and there's kind of a dervish nature to the journey that we're on.
Yeah, and totally. And I love how there is an imagery sort of painted for us on how the light will return back to us. And yet we're talking about moving from perception to knowledge too. So any kind of imagery we could look at would still be within the realm of perception. And it's a really great baseline. It's a really great like reframing it. But then we come back ultimately, we're going to come back to that state of pure being the light. So exactly. So the next section, paragraph, says we're at as miracles, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
As miracles in this world join you to your brothers, so do your creations establish your fatherhood in heaven. Is to the fatherhood of God, and he has given you the power to create the witnesses to yours, which is as his. Deny a brother here, and you deny the witnesses to your fatherhood in heaven. The miracle that God created is perfect, as are the miracles that you established in his name. They need no healing, nor do you, when you accept them.
That was a huge crack in the mirror of the ego, because if we're imagining that we have created Hitler and Mussolini and all of the great villains throughout history and all of the great tragedies throughout history, then that is unto itself a tremendous wedge in our belief that we are separate from God. So as we get away from that idea that we have created separateness, we have created all these unique individuals, and get back to the idea that we did populate this part of the universe that we occupy with all of the people around us, from whom we have lifted the veil of our perception of them, then all of a sudden we start to be astonished by how much of a parent we actually are, and we start to be humbled, and we begin to actually be more mindful in the role that we need to take on.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting that you use the word parent, because I think that when, you know, that's something, a perspective that actually has developed through my study of the Course, is kind of realizing that, you know, like the way that God is our parent, you know, we are in a way a parent to our own creations. And so, you know, when we look around and see the world, the world around us, you know, that is really in our mind, you're really looking at, quote unquote, your children, you know, your creation, what you've made or what you've created, and you choose which one to see.
Exactly. That's absolutely it. So it's not about creating bodies so that, you know, you have a little mini me running around on the planet, acting out your unconscious needs and desires, but it's to realize that all of humankind was a part of his creations that went on within your own mind. And being able to bless all of them is the key to the totality of salvation, your salvation, and what is seemingly apart from you, the salvation of all of humankind.
Hmm. And you could even say the Big Bang happened in our mind, right? Like the tiny mad idea.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Mm.
That's exactly how it played out. Well, looking at this final paragraph, it says, "Yet in this world your perception is unwitnessed. God knows it, but you do not, and so you do not share his witness to it, nor do you witness unto him, for reality is witnessed to as one. God waits your witness to his Son and to himself. The miracles you do on earth are lifted up to heaven and to him. They witness to what you do not know, and as they reach the gates of heaven, God will open them, for never would he leave his own beloved Son outside them and beyond himself." So here we're getting that final exclamation point, I guess you could say, at the end of this chapter, that is giving us absolute control and power over all of creation, in that we have to stop believing that we have in fact created separation, and start recognizing that everybody that you encounter is a part of you.
I also get that sort of yellow brick road imagery when it comes to the paragraph like this, where it's like God has given us the way back to remembering him, get back to remembering our wholeness. And although it seems like there's this journey to undertake, and you know, talking about how miracles are basically the medium for that journey. Miracles are the way that we're going to remember, by giving that love, by letting it come through us. But ultimately, it's just remembering who we are.
That's very true. It's and is not a fight. That's the thing that we have to realize. When you start fighting for, you know, for your awakening, then you know that you have created a state of separation and a state of duality within your own journey. So it is a process of relaxing and allowance. And as we are able to surrender and just relax into it, the power is restored, the vision is restored, and we start to see a world populated with bright lights rather than dark shadows. So it is a very appropriate way to finish off this particular section of this chapter.
Yeah, and knowing just how natural it is to be in the state in which God created us, that really the unnatural way is the way that you see on the planet so often, which is the ego running around trying to sustain itself. But That's unnatural to God.
Yes, absolutely. It is the death, doom, and destruction.
Right.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to have to dash here, but I think we had a wonderful journey through this chapter and or this section, and we will in 1 week reconvene for part 9, the cloud of guilt. So this should be really interesting to explore.
Sounds great, Chris. It's my pleasure too. And I'll see you next week.
Enjoy.
All right, you too. Bye.
Goodbye.